Happy St. Brigid's Day. I'm going to make a little cross. I'm going to show you how to do it. This is a small one, and they can go vary in size up to a huge size like what my daughter made. Absolutely gigantic. So I'm going to show you how to make one. It's traditional for Imbolc for St. Brigid's Day today. And while I'm doing it, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the folklore around St. Brigid's Day. So first of all, we're going to start off with a single rush and another single rush, and we're going to cross them like this, and then you're going to fold one over the other like that. Okay, so you've got now a T shape. Next thing, your next rush, and you're going to line it up so that three of the points are coming out the same direction, two down this way and one that way. And then, now this is important, I don't know if you can see there, but you're kind of trapping the last one you did every time. So if you can see that clearly enough there, I hope. Next one I'm going to show you, I'm going to go like this. When I get into the swing of it, I'll be able to tell you more about the folklore. Just 1 second. I just want to get you started. Put that one, and this is going to go to make the final part of the cross, okay? Like this. You see that? So it's trapping the last one every time. The next one is going to go this way, and you're going to keep going around that way, one at a time in circles. And you have to maintain that pattern to get the proper pattern on the front at the end. So I'm going to be making that while I'm telling you about St. Brigid's Day, or Imbolc. Now, first of all, it's the 1st of February, and here in Ireland, that means it's the start of spring. And long ago, it would have been called Imbolc, and people have started to use that name a lot again. And that comes from, we think it comes from the term Imbolc, which means in your stomach. And it's talking about the fertility really surrounding springtime and new life at this time of the year. Because in the Celtic calendar, St. Brigid's Day or Imbolc marks the start of spring. Now, it might feel a bit like winter outside, but that's the way it is. And there's a story about the Cailleach. Now, I've mentioned the Cailleach a few times before, the old hag. She was the weather goddess, basically. She was in charge of the weather. And the story is that if you have a day today that's very sunny and bright and pleasant, that the Cailleach is probably out gathering firewood. She's making it bright so that she can go out and gather the firewood for a long winter ahead. So in other words, you're not out of the woods yet. However, if it's a rainy day, if it's miserable out, the chances are the Cailleach is still asleep, and it will then turn into a shorter winter. You have a much shorter winter. So that's kind of like the basis of Groundhog Day as well. Now, Brigid herself, there's two types of Brigid. There's Brigid the goddess from pagan times, and then there's Brigid the saint, who ended up embodying a lot of the same qualities as the goddess. So she was, the goddess, first of all, was the patron of poetry, of healing, and of smithcraft or blacksmiths. So the blacksmith's part gives rise to a symbol that she's often associated with of fire. And that fire also symbolizes creativity, the spark of creativity. And so with all this fire, you will often see pictures of Brigid the goddess and Brigid the saint with this fire. Also, there are so many holy wells around the country associated with Brigid. And the reason for that is because they provide healing and renewal. And of course, at the holy well, you're at the closest part of the world to the other world. So it's like a connection there, and it's a very holy place. And a lot of people do pilgrimages to St. Brigid on a day like that. I don't know if you can see how my cross is turned on a day like today, when Imbolc, when we're celebrating the goddess and the saint. See that there? So that's how it's turning out so far. I'm just keeping going around and around, and try and keep it tight in the middle, because after a few days, what tends to happen is the rushes tend to get a bit drier, and when they get a bit drier, they get loose, and then you might have to tighten them up slightly. Anyway, so that's the holy wells. And then the blacksmiths thing. You see, Brigid the goddess was a member of the Tuatha De Danann. So she was a daughter of the Dagda, it's said. And she became associated with forging weapons for the Tuatha. Now, that, of course, means that she was a very practical goddess. She was a very active person. She was associated with war, actually. Then again, she was also, as I said, associated very much with healing, and the properties of the water from the holy wells would have been associated with that as well. Now, then if we move on further past the pagan roots to Brigid of Kildare, who was a real historical figure, and she was born in 451 AD, and she was the daughter of a rich lord, I think, and they were quite wealthy. But anyway, she became Christian. She was there's some stories around her being baptized by St. Patrick. All of this is, of course, well, I don't want to say fabricated, but it was definitely embellished down the years through the hagiographies, which were like I don't know, how would you put it, like something to celebrate the saints, but it wasn't necessarily historically true. And Brigid, anyway, she had lots of different miracles associated with her. She was often associated with a cow. I think it was a white cow with red ears. You might see her depicted that way sometimes. And that again has to do with the fact that she would bring spring, and she was a carer of livestock and healing. And that's why when people make Brigid's crosses like this, they often end up putting them in barns or in sheds or on farms, but they also supposedly protect against fire. And again, that's back to the association with fire and Brigid as well, because Imbolc itself is one of the many fire festivals, one of the four main fire festivals of the Irish calendar. Anyway, one of the great miracles that Brigid performed was that she once turned water into beer. Now, I've heard about turning water into wine. I know that Jesus was famous for this, whereas Brigid herself now was more into the beer. And of course, back in her time, water wouldn't have always been safe to drink, and beer would have been considered a lot safer. So for that reason, she actually provided beer for, I think it was a leper colony. And that was all again written about in her hagiographies. But then her most famous miracle was when she decided she wanted to build a monastery. So she went to a local chieftain and she begged the chieftain, please, 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 I need some land to build my monastery. I've been sent by God, and telling all the story. And anyway, the chieftain had no time for that at all. He was a pagan anyway. And he said, no, you're not getting any. And then she was like, well, come on now, please, please. And eventually, after a lot of to and fro, he agreed. And he said, as simple as this, he said, it's like this. That cloak on your back now, you put that in the ground. And whatever ground is covered by your cloak, you can have that now for your monastery. So she took off the cloak, put it on the ground, and what happened? It spread, and it spread, and it spread. It was a miracle. There was the cloak kept going on for acres and acres and acres, and she ended up with all of this fabulous land that she used for her monastery. And the chieftain was so overcome by this miracle that, of course, he abided by his promise. He got the fear of God in him, literally. And I think he might have been the same guy who was actually dying on his deathbed when St. Brigid supposedly converted him to Christianity by making this cross, which she was trying to explain about Jesus Christ and everything through the use of this cross. That's the story of the chieftain. She also at one stage gave her sword, one of her famous swords, to a beggar. Now again, this is going back to the blacksmith thing, because I think the whole association with iron and fire and as a protector. So anyway, she also is associated in Christian stories as having a perpetual flame. So after Brigid had settled her monastery in Kildare, she actually kept a fire there. And after she died, the nuns in her convent, in her monastery, kept a perpetual fire lighting. And this fire was kept lighting for hundreds of years, up until, I think it was like the 13th century, until a Norman lord came along, and he didn't like the idea of these kind of pagan-y kind of roots coming in, spoiling Christianity. So he ended up extinguishing the fire. Now, luckily, back in 1993, just gone, sounds like just gone because I remember it, but of course it's a long time ago now, In 1993, the nuns, the Brigidine nuns in Kildare, actually relit the fire, the perpetual fire. So it was rekindled and it still burns today. So she has Brigid. The Brigid's cross, as I said, is a symbol of protection. It's made from rushes normally, which you find in the fields around here, or straw. If you were more organised than me, you would have been able to be out last night and leave out a broth frida. So the broth is like a scarf or a cloth or something that you'd leave out on the bushes, so that when Brigid is passing, you'd be able to get her blessing on it, and that would provide healing for you, for any illnesses you've got during the year. People would often also bring it to the holy well and dip it in the holy well, so the water would add to it. And apparently, if you use the same broth brida every year, it becomes more and more powerful and more effective as a cure. So there's a little tip for you for next year. I wasn't organised this year, but anyway. And of course, there's also the classic Brigid. So on the night before St. Brigid's Day, we have Brigid. Oh, have I made a mistake here? On the night before we have Brigid, children would go around, a bit like the Wren boys, and they'd sing songs, say little prayers, ask for money from the neighbours and things like that, and they might have a little doll with them called a Brigid, and the Brigid would be made out of rushes or cloth, and at night time then the Brigid would be put to bed by the hearth. So now what else have we got to say to you? I think that's about it, yeah. Brigid, so she is, and what you do then is you just tie it at the edges, tie it. And here's one that my daughter made earlier. You can make them with 3 legs as well, as you can see. A few years ago, the triangle one, I did that as well. But this is what it looks like after a few years. It gets a bit drier. You're supposed to throw them out every year and make your new one. I love it. I just love it. I love how kind of old looking it gets. And you can make them as big or as small as you want. I think I'm going to use this teeny tiny one, hang it up the car or something. Anyway, so Banach tí na féile brida. Slán!